This video is brought to you by Numbers with Nicole. We're going to find a missing angle of a right triangle using inverse trigonometry. So here is a right triangle where we are looking for angle F, and below I've identified what the inverse trigonometry equations are that we will be using. The ones in each box are the same equation. There's just different ways to represent them. So there are 3 equations there. So how do we undo cosine, sine, and tangent? So inverse operations are operations that undo or cancel each other out. So we're going to think back to algebra here. And let's look at the first one. So if we had 10 equals a plus 2, if we wanted to solve for a, we would use the opposite or inverse operation to addition, which would be subtraction, and we would subtract 2 from both sides. In the next one, we would have a divided by 2 equals 15. So to solve for a by itself, we would do the inverse operation of dividing by 2, which would be multiplying by 2 on both sides. And for the last one, we have a squared. So the opposite of squaring a is taking the square root. The inverse to squaring is square rooting. So those are opposites. They undo each other. They cancel each other out. So what does that mean for trigonometry, trigonometric ratios? So on the top, we have the normal ratio that you would use if you were given an angle and then you wanted to find a side. We would just use the normal tan, sine, cosine button in our calculators. However, what if we had an acute angle in that triangle that we didn't know? So let's say this one or the top one, either one. I'll use theta for the top one. So let's say I didn't know that. So then I would look at which sides out of opposite, adjacent, and hypotenuse I was given to identify which ratio I could use. And then since we're looking for the angle, right, since we're looking for the angle, then we would use one of these equations. And now this middle equation is the one that you're going to see in your calculator when you push the second sine or the second cosine or the second tangent button. And those are called the arc operations, the arcsin, the arccos. They undo normal tangent. They undo normal cosine. They undo normal sine to get the angle. So for angles, we use the arc sine or the arc cosine or the arc tangent, depending on which sides we have available to us. So let's go back to that example here. So we want to find the measure of angle F, and we want to round to the nearest tenth. So let's look at what sides we are given. So we have the opposite. We have the hypotenuse. So if we think about our TOA acronym here, I have O and H, which means sine. So the sine of angle F would be the opposite over the hypotenuse. Now, if we were looking for a side, we would put sine of f over 1, but we don't know f, so that's an unknown that we do not know. I cannot divide by sine because sine is not multiplying. The opposite of sine is called the arcsin. So sine -1 is called the arcsin, and we're going to do that to both sides. You don't have to show this step here. I'm just showing you how we get to this little bottom part here. Okay, so the arcsin and the sine are going to cancel out. They undo each other, leaving me with angle F. And then in my calculator, I'm going to hit the second sine button, 3 divided by 5, close it, hit enter. And as long as my calculator is in degree mode, we are going to get 36.9 to the nearest tenth for the measure of angle F.